I had always been fascinated by abandoned places, especially those with a dark history. So when I heard about the old asylum on the outskirts of town, I knew I had to explore it. The asylum had been abandoned for over 20 years and it was rumored to be haunted. I grabbed my camera and headed out, determined to capture some creepy footage. As I approached the building, I felt a chill run down my spine. It was a massive structure with vines growing up the walls and broken windows. The doors were rusted shut, but I managed to find a way in through a window. The inside was even more eerie than the outside. The halls were dimly lit, and the air was thick with dust. As I made my way through the building, I heard strange noises, but I brushed them off as just my imagination. As I entered one of the patients' rooms, I felt a cold breeze brush past me, sending shivers down my spine. I noticed a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye, but when I turned to look, nothing was there. I felt a sudden sense of unease, like I was being watched. As I continued to explore, I heard a distant whisper, and I froze in place. I couldn't make out what it was saying, but it sounded like it was coming from one of the rooms. I slowly made my way towards the sound, my heart racing with fear. As I entered the room, I saw a figure standing in the corner. It was a woman in a white gown, her long dark hair cascading down her back. I couldn't see her face, but I could feel her eyes on me. I tried to run, but my feet felt like they were glued to the floor. The woman started to move towards me, and I could hear her whispering my name. I finally managed to break free and ran out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. As I made my way towards the exit, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, but no one was there. Suddenly, the lights went out, leaving me in total darkness. I felt someone grab my shoulder, and I screamed. When the lights came back on, I found myself outside the asylum, my camera lying on the ground next to me. I couldn't remember how I got there, but I knew I had to get out of there as fast as I could. I grabbed my camera and ran back to my car. As I drove away from the asylum, I replayed the footage on my camera. But there was nothing there, just a blank screen. I couldn't believe what I had experienced. I knew I had to go back and investigate, but I was too scared to even think about it. Years have passed since that night, and I still have nightmares about the woman in the asylum. I never did go back, but the memory of that night will haunt me forever. The asylum still stands, a reminder of the horrors that happen within its walls.
It was a beautiful autumn day, with crisp air and clear blue skies, so I packed my backpack with some water, snacks, and a flashlight, and set out on my adventure. As I approached the farm, I could see that it was old and dilapidated, with creaky wooden fences, rusted tools scattered around, and the remains of an old barn with its roof half collapsed. The farmhouse itself was a two-story wooden structure with peeling paint and boarded-up windows, making it clear that no one had lived there for years. As I approached the front door, I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I pushed it aside and stepped inside. The air inside was musty and stale, with cobwebs covering the corners of the ceiling and the floorboards creaking beneath my feet. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and the furniture was covered in dust and cobwebs. It was clear that this place had been abandoned for a long time. I explored the ground floor of the farmhouse first, peering into each room, and each one was eerily silent and empty. The living room had a cracked, leather sofa and a small TV set, and the kitchen had an old-fashioned stove and a few dirty pots and pans. The dining room had a table with chairs and a dusty chandelier hanging above, and I couldn't help but imagine a family sitting around it, enjoying a meal. As I made my way upstairs, I noticed that the atmosphere grew even more ominous, with the air feeling thicker and more oppressive. The upstairs hallway was dimly lit, with a few shafts of light coming through the boarded-up windows, casting eerie shadows across the floor. I felt my heart pounding in my chest as I approached the first bedroom, and slowly pushed open the door. The room was empty, with just a small bed frame and a dusty dresser. But as I turned to leave, I noticed something strange in the corner of my eye. In the mirror on the wall, I saw a reflection of a dark figure, standing behind me. My heart raced as I whipped around, but there was nothing there. I tried to shake off the feeling of being watched and continued exploring. As I moved on to the next room, I noticed that the wallpaper had started to peel away from the walls, revealing old, faded drawings. It was as if someone had tried to scratch their way out of the room. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease and continued on, but my heart was pounding in my chest. The next room was even worse. As soon as I stepped inside, I felt an icy chill run down my spine, and the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. It was as if the temperature had dropped 10 degrees in an instant. I tried to turn back, but something inside me compelled me to keep exploring. I walked over to the bed, and as I reached out to touch it, something brushed against my hand. I jumped back, and my flashlight flickered and went out. I was plunged into total darkness, and the silence was deafening. I stood there for what felt like hours, frozen in fear. The only sound I could hear was my own heartbeat, pounding in my ears. But then I heard something else, a faint whisper, barely audible. I couldn't make out what it was saying, but it was getting louder and closer. I realized then that I needed to get out of there, and fast. I turned and ran down the stairs, stumbling and tripping over the old furniture. As I burst out of the front door, I gasped for air, grateful to be out of the oppressive atmosphere of the abandoned farmhouse. The sun had started to set, casting long shadows across the farmyard, and the temperature had dropped even further, adding to the eeriness of the place. As I made my way back to my car, I heard a sound behind me, like someone whispering my name. I turned around, but there was no one there. My heart was racing as I quickened my pace, my eyes darting around in search of any sign of life. Suddenly, I heard a loud creaking sound, like a door opening, and I spun around again, this time shining my flashlight in the direction of the noise. As the beam of light swept across the farmyard, I caught a glimpse of something moving in the shadows. My heart in my throat, I started to run, my footsteps pounding on the dirt road. But no matter how fast I ran, the sound of footsteps behind me never seemed to fade. I was sure I was being pursued by something, but I couldn't bring myself to look back. Finally, I reached my car, and I fumbled with the keys, trying to unlock the door as quickly as possible. As I swung the door open and jumped inside, I could hear the footsteps getting closer and closer. I slammed the door shut and frantically started the engine, spinning the car around and speeding away from the abandoned farm. As I drove away, I saw a figure in the rearview mirror, standing in the middle of the road, watching me go. When I arrived home, I was shaking uncontrollably, my mind replaying the events of the evening over and over again. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been following me, something dark and malevolent, that had been waiting for me in the abandoned farmhouse. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about the abandoned farm and the strange events that had taken place there. I found myself researching the history of the place, trying to uncover any clues as to what might have happened there, but all I could find were rumors of dark secrets and unspeakable horrors. Despite the terror that I had experienced, a part of me was drawn back to the abandoned farm, and I knew that I would return one day, to face my fears and uncover the truth behind the darkness that lurked there. But for now, I could only try to forget the whispered voices and the creaking doors, and hope that whatever had been following me had finally been left behind. Supernatural was just a myth, something that people used to scare each other. But then, something happened that changed everything. It was spring break, and my friends and I decided to rent a cabin in the woods for a few days. The cabin was old, with wooden walls and a fireplace. It had a cozy charm to it, and we were excited to spend the week there. The first night was uneventful. We played cards and drank beer, enjoying each other's company. But as the night grew darker, we started to hear strange noises outside. At first, we thought it was just the wind, but the sounds were too unnatural for that. Then, we heard footsteps. Heavy footsteps, pacing around the cabin. We all froze, listening to the eerie sound. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped right outside the door. We were all too scared to move. We could hear breathing on the other side of the door. It was slow, deliberate, and it sent shivers down our spines. We huddled together, waiting for something to happen. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and we saw a figure standing there. It was a woman, but she didn't look quite human. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes were black, like two empty voids. She wore an old, tattered dress, and her hair was long and tangled. We all screamed, and she disappeared in an instant. We were left in the darkness, shivering with fear. We couldn't believe what we had just seen. The rest of the night was a blur. We tried to stay calm, but the fear was too much to bear. We could hear strange noises all around us, and we felt like we were being watched. Every time we heard a sound, we jumped, thinking that the woman was coming back. The next morning, we packed up our things and left the cabin. We never spoke about what happened that night, but I know we all felt it. It was something supernatural, something that we couldn't explain. Since then, I've never been back to that cabin. I don't know what happened to the woman, or why she appeared to us that night. But the memory of that chilling encounter will stay with me forever, a reminder that there are some things in this world that we can't explain, some mysteries that we may never understand.